It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorne. I'm talking with the British comedy duo David Mitchell and Robert Webb. At this point, I want to give you a heads up. There's going to be a pretty abrupt tone shift in this interview. You'll hear me ask Robert Webb about some Twitter posts he wrote criticizing a British charity called Mermaids, which supports transgender, non-binary, and gender-diverse children. Mermaids has been targeted by people and groups who oppose gender-affirming medical care for trans children in the UK. Things got a little tense in the conversation. We're presenting the next segment basically as it happened, so you might hear some awkward silences. Also, if those issues are something to which you are sensitive, we thought you should know in advance. Okay, let's get back into it. I want to ask you about something a little intense, right up there with having gone through heart treatment. So a couple of years ago, Robert, you tweeted about a piece in the Times of London that was very critical of an organization called Mermaids, which is an organization that does education and advocacy and aid around trans kids. And you were pretty pointed in your retweet of that article as well. And at the time, Mermaids was kind of like being targeted and ended up having a big government grant it received reconsidered. It was ultimately upheld, but went into like review. So you were asked about it. So the tweet was deleted. You were asked about it relatively recently. You were asked whether you regretted the tweet by the Times of London. And you said, not really. On the other hand, I started to say something, then I stopped. And that means everyone can rush in to fill the blanks. He's a transphobe. He's a Once you say, I'm not transphobic, but it's a disaster, it just seems unlucky that you can't acknowledge that there are going to be competing interests here and there without that becoming you're a bigot. I guess, given that you said you don't regret the tweet, does it still like reflect how you feel about Mermaids or organizations like
No, I mean,
Mermaids?
Janice Turner wrote this column. I can't even really remember what her specific objections were, but they made sense to me at the time, and I retweeted it approvingly. And then it was there was this feeling that if you criticize a charity, that is, or the way a charity operates or its methodology, that is the same thing as criticizing the client base. It's like saying if I've got a problem with the way Oxfam has been operating, it's because I hate poor people in the third world, and it's kind of like it started to feel like if you criticize Brexit, it's because you hate Britain, or if you criticize Jeremy Corbyn, it's because you hate poor people. It was just a really weird way of looking at it, and the whole debate is really overheated, and it's impossible to really talk about this or say anything even remotely reasonable without what I say being used as a vehicle for another round of defamation and abuse, really. So it's not a topic I tend to dive into anymore at all, really.
It's kind of scary for me because I have two gender nonconforming kids, one of whom is transgender. And I know that when my oldest kid came out to me when she was in kindergarten, I was really reliant on an organization called Gender Spectrum that does many of the same things that Mermaids does. And, so many people don't understand what the best practices are for caring for trans kids. And, the kinds of criticisms, I think people react in an overheated way because, there are a lot of trans people who weren't supported when they were kids, I know that you had talked about talking to them, to the folks at Mermaids when all this happened. Did that ever end up happening?
No, it didn't. No, because I mean, it just wasn't a conversation that I wanted to carry on getting into because the reaction was so strong. It was as if I'd said, I hate trans children, which of course I don't. I mean, do I have to say, okay, maybe I do. That is not how I feel about the situation. It was just, it was critical of the way that Mermaids was conducting itself.
Do you mean specifically the way
I can't remember, Jesse, really.
The organization? Yeah. How do you feel?
It was the end of 2018, and it's not something that I really want to talk about.
I mean, do you feel like it's appropriate to affirm kids' gender identities?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's on a case-by-case basis, but I'm not really an expert. You're a parent and you've got first-hand experience.
Okay, I know it's a really tough thing to talk about and a thorny thicket to wade into, given how intense people's feelings are about it. So I appreciate you talking to me about it. Is there anything that has been left unsaid that you would like to say? Okay. Well, Robert and David. Robert, I'm sorry to end on such a tough note, but I didn't want to leave it. I didn't want to leave it loose. I enjoy and admire your work so much, both of you. So thank you for all of that, and thanks for the great new show, and thanks for talking to me.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
David Mitchell and Robert Webb. Their show Back is airing now on IFC. The American Academy of Pediatrics and all other major doctors groups in the United States recommend care for gender nonconforming kids that affirms their stated gender identity.